Welcome to another episode of the Bark Brigade podcast by Dogazilla Magazine.
Thank you. It's really great to be here for this one.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here because, well, imagine this. You're out walking your dog, it's a sweltering July afternoon, and they start violently panting.
Right.
They're acting lethargic, looking totally desperate for relief. I mean, your absolute first instinct is probably to grab a giant bowl of ice-cold water, right? Just let them drink as much as they want.
Oh, 100%. It's human nature.
Exactly. We are so conditioned to think that, hydration and rapid cooling are the immediate cures for being overheated. But what if I told you that doing exactly that, acting on your most basic, loving human instinct, could actually send your dog into fatal physiological shock?
Yeah, it is a really sobering reality to confront.
Yeah.
Because we naturally project our own biological responses onto our canine companions.
We totally do.
As humans, we have a very specific, deeply ingrained physical response to high temperatures. And we just assume our dogs operate on that exact same operating system.
Right, which they don't.
Not at all. So today, we are going deep into the mechanics of canine biology. We're using a remarkably detailed piece from Dogazilla Magazine, and it's titled Overheating in Dogs: Signs of Heat Stroke. We're going to examine the stark differences in our evolutionary design.
Because it's not just trivia, is it?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Understanding these differences is the fundamental key to preventing a normal summer afternoon from, well, turning into an irreversible tragedy.
So whether you are a first-time pup parent navigating your first summer with a new dog or, a seasoned veteran who has shared your life with dogs for decades, I really want you to sit back and engage with this material.
Absolutely.
Because what we are covering in this deep dive is highly counterintuitive. We're going to dismantle the physiological traps that exist in our modern environments, and we are going to build a comprehensive, scientifically grounded protocol for keeping your dog safe.
Sounds like a solid plan.
So let's start with the absolute baseline. I want to look at the fundamental biological disadvantage that dogs face the second the temperature starts to climb. Because, to understand the dog, we first have to understand the human.
Right, the contrast is important.
We have this incredible, almost magical ability to sweat all over our bodies. We are essentially walking, breathing evaporative coolers, but dogs just do not have that luxury.
Yeah, consider the evolutionary history of human beings. I mean, we evolved as endurance runners on the hot savannas.
The whole persistence hunting thing.
Exactly. Our primary survival mechanism for hunting and traveling long distances under relentless sun was our eccrine sweat glands. We are covered in millions of them, from our foreheads down to our calves.
Wow, millions.
Oh, yeah. And they pump out a thin layer of saline fluid, and as the ambient air hits that fluid, it evaporates. And that draws massive amounts of heat away from our internal core. We possess just an unparalleled capacity for thermal regulation through surface evaporation.
Which is pretty amazing.
It is. Now, contrast that with the evolutionary lineage of the dog, which, descends from the wolf.
Right.
They did not evolve to run marathons in direct midday sunlight across asphalt. Consequently, they only possess a very specific type of sweat gland called merocrine glands, and those are located primarily on their paw pads.
I'm trying to visualize the math on that. If you take the entire surface area of a human being, we are utilizing almost 100% of our skin as a cooling mechanism.
Yeah.
But a dog is relying on an area roughly the size of a few coasters.
Basically, yeah. It is a profound anatomical bottleneck. I mean, a dog has some minor moisture evaporation that occurs on the surface of their nose, but when you calculate the total surface area to mass ratio, it is astonishingly inefficient for extreme heat.
Just because they have so much mass compared to their paws.
Right. They have a tremendous amount of internal mass muscles, organs, and a dense skeletal structure. And all of that is generating metabolic heat, especially when they're running or playing. And yet, their functional surface area designed to release that heat through sweating is confined to the very bottoms of their feet.
That is wild.
In modern domesticated environments, this evolutionary design is just pushed far beyond its intended limits.
I want you, the listener, to just imagine the physical reality of that for a second. Imagine being forced to wear a thick winter parka, insulated with a dense undercoat, in the middle of July, and then you decide to go for a jog.
Sounds miserable.
Right, but your body's only built-in mechanism for cooling down that soaring internal temperature is a slightly damp nose and the soles of your feet. You would reach a critical state of hyperthermia in a matter of minutes.
You really would.
And yet, we routinely take our dogs out into the blazing sun, onto concrete sidewalks and expect them to simply keep up with our pace.
Which is exactly why the source material places such immense weight on recognizing the early signs of heat stroke. When we observe a dog acting distressed in the heat, it is not merely that they are experiencing subjective discomfort.
Okay, what are we actually seeing then?
We are witnessing the real-time failure of their primary cooling systems. The internal temperature is rising much faster than their anatomy can physically vent it.
Let's break down those signs specifically because the article details this under the heading Signs of Heat Stroke in Dogs.
Yeah, it's a crucial list.
It lists heavy panting and drooling, trouble breathing, a remarkably fast heartbeat, acting weak or lethargic, vomiting or diarrhea, and in severe cases, having seizures or passing out.
It's a terrifying progression.
It really is. And the article is unequivocal, saying this condition can cause internal organ damage and death. And, I'm looking at this list, and while panting makes total sense, my mind immediately snags on the gastrointestinal symptoms.
Vomiting and diarrhea.
Yeah. If a dog is simply too hot, I'm trying to deduce why that would lead to vomiting and bloody diarrhea. It feels like we are dealing with a severe blood flow issue. If the body is desperate to shed heat, it must be pumping all the blood to the surface. Is that what's happening? Is the stomach essentially being starved of resources?
Your deduction is absolutely spot on.
Right.
We are talking about a systemic prioritization of survival, orchestrated entirely by the brain.
Okay.
When the hypothalamus, which is basically the brain's internal thermostat, when it detects that the core body temperature is crossing a dangerous threshold, it triggers an emergency protocol.
Like flipping a switch.
Exactly. The cardiovascular system goes into absolute overdrive. The heart rate spikes violently. The goal is to pump as much superheated blood away from the core vital organs and push it out toward the periphery of the body.
Towards the skin.
Right, toward the skin and the mucous membranes, hoping to find some relief through whatever minimal evaporation is actually possible.
But the body only has a set volume of blood.
Precisely. It is a zero-sum game. If you aggressively shunt massive volumes of blood to the skin and the extremities, well, you are actively draining blood from the internal organs.
Oh, wow.
And the gastrointestinal tract is almost always the first system to be sacrificed. The blood vessels supplying the stomach and the intestines constrict.
So they just get cut off.
Basically, yeah. The cells lining the gut are suddenly deprived of the oxygen and nutrients they need to survive. It's a state known as ischemia. And within a shockingly short window of time, those cells begin to suffocate and die. The protective mucosal barrier of the intestines literally breaks down.
Wait, so the vomiting and the diarrhea we are seeing aren't just like an upset stomach?
No, not at all.
It's the physical manifestation of the internal organs beginning to necrotize.
It is tissue death. And it becomes even more insidious because the gut is full of bacteria and endotoxins.
Oh, that sounds bad.
It is. When that cellular barrier breaks down due to oxygen starvation, those toxins can leak directly into the bloodstream, triggering systemic inflammation and hastening multiple organ failure.
Good Lord.
Yeah. By the time a dog progresses to the neurological signs mentioned in the article, the seizures, the loss of consciousness, the hyperthermic blood has caused the brain tissue itself to swell and sustain actual thermal damage.
That completely reframes the entire concept of a dog being a little too hot. We aren't talking about a temporary inconvenience here. We are talking about a cascading cellular crisis.
Life-threatening one, yes.
Which brings a tremendous amount of weight to the preventative measures outlined in the piece. Under the heading, How to Prevent Heat Stroke, the checklist includes putting out multiple cool water bowls inside and out, walking only in the early morning or evening, avoiding exercise in peak heat, keeping the home cool with blinds, fans, or AC, and providing outdoor shade like canopies or doghouses with good airflow.
And every single one of those measures is designed with one singular goal: to keep the dog's internal temperature from ever triggering that biological emergency protocol. Once the hypothalamus hits that panic button and begins sacrificing the gut to save the brain, arresting and reversing the damage becomes a massive veterinary challenge.
There is one preventative measure here that I want to really lean into because it connects directly to our earlier point about evolutionary biology. The article explicitly warns about hot pavement.
Oh, this is so important.
It states that hot pavement and concrete can burn your pet's paws, so you should walk on grassy areas or use protective booties. I want to push on the physics of this for a moment. If you imagine walking barefoot on black asphalt in August, it physically blisters human skin.
Right, it's agonizing.
But based on what we establish about where dogs sweat, this isn't just about pain, is it? If they're burning their paw pads, aren't they actively destroying their only functional cooling centers?
Yes. It is a devastating double blow to their physiology. The skin on the bottom of a dog's paw is highly specialized. It is a dense, intricate network of blood vessels and fat tissues designed to act as a thermal window.
Okay, a thermal window.
Yeah, it is meant to release internal heat into the cool earth and to release sweat for evaporation.
Yeah.
But when a dog is forced to walk on baking asphalt, which, by the way, can easily reach temperatures of 140 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer sun, they are no longer releasing heat.
The ground is hotter than they are.
Exactly. The principle of thermal conduction reverses. They are absorbing massive, lethal amounts of heat directly from the ground into their bloodstream.
It's like sealing up the exhaust pipe on a car engine while simultaneously pumping hot air directly into the intake.
That is a very apt metaphor. And simultaneously, the extreme heat is searing the skin, destroying the sweat glands, and blistering the tissue. Even if you get the dog off the pavement, their primary mechanism for dumping heat has been compromised or just completely ruined.
So they're trapped.
Their body is trapped with a soaring internal temperature and a destroyed exhaust system.
Wow. So keeping them off the pavement, walking in the shade, keeping the air conditioning running, these are intuitive, logical steps. But this is where our deep dive takes a sharp, highly counterintuitive turn.
Here we go.
Because the protocols for what we do, once a dog is already hot, once they have crossed that threshold and are actively overheating, they fly in the face of everything we think we know. Let's move into the hydration paradox.
This section contains arguably the most vital, life-saving, and deeply misunderstood information in the entire source text.
The heading literally reads, "Don't give water to overheating dogs." The first time I read that, my brain completely rejected it.
It's hard to accept at first.
I mean, if my dog is panting violently, her tongue is hanging out, and she is looking at me desperate for a drink, my absolute first, undeniable instinct is to grab a bowl of ice-cold water and let her chug it until she feels better.
Because that's what you would want.
Exactly, but the article explicitly warns against this. It states that when a dog overheats, blood flow increases to the skin to dissipate heat. And drinking water constricts these blood vessels, pulling blood away from the skin, hindering cooling and accelerating heat stroke. I really need to understand the mechanics of this because it feels so wrong.
Yeah, to understand why giving water is so dangerous in that specific moment, we have to look closely at the vascular system, specifically the mechanisms of vasodilation and vasoconstriction.
Okay, break that down for us.
When a dog is overheating, their body relies on vasodilation at the surface level. The smooth muscles lining the blood vessels near the skin relax. The vessels open up wide. They dilate to act like a massive internal radiator, trying to dump the internal metabolic heat out into the surrounding environment.
They are essentially opening all the windows in a hothouse.
Yes, perfect analogy. But now, visualize what happens when you introduce a large volume of cold or even just cool water into a stomach that is situated deep within the core of that overheated body. The stomach is surrounded by vital organs and a massive network of blood vessels. The instant the cool water hits the stomach lining, the temperature receptors in the core register a sudden, drastic drop in temperature.
Oh, I see where this is going.
The central nervous system reacts instantly. It initiates widespread vasoconstriction. The blood vessels at the skin surface slam shut.
They just close up.
Yeah, the body's internal logic dictates the core is suddenly cold. We are losing our ambient heat. We must conserve energy.
Oh, man. So it pulls all that hot, dilated blood away from the skin and traps it deep inside the body.
It creates a thermal prison. The vital organs, which were already on the verge of cooking, are suddenly flooded with trapped hyperthermic blood because the external radiator has been abruptly shut off.
Let me build on that car radiator analogy because this is wild. Think of the dog's skin blood vessels like the radiator at the front of a vehicle.
Right.
The engine is running way too hot, the needle is in the red, so the car routes the hot, boiling coolant out to the radiator grill to catch the breeze and hopefully shed some of that thermal energy. Giving an overheated dog a huge bowl of water right away is like suddenly clamping the radiator hoses shut.
Exactly.
You cut off the fluid to the radiator, and you trap all that boiling coolant right inside the engine block. You are basically guaranteeing that the engine is going to melt down.
That captures the physical reality perfectly.
Yeah.
You are mechanically shutting down their only external cooling mechanism at the precise millisecond they need it to function the most.
I am going to push back here on behalf of our listeners, though, because the anxiety of withholding water is immense.
It is. It's very stressful.
If a dog is panting violently, they're exhaling massive amounts of moisture. We can see the drool, we can hear the raspy breathing. They are losing fluids rapidly. Why wouldn't replacing that lost moisture immediately be the absolute top priority? We know that dehydration is a major component of heat exhaustion. Doesn't severe dehydration cause heat stroke?
It is a completely logical concern, but it really comes down to a strict, unforgiving biological hierarchy of needs.
Hierarchy of needs.
Yes, dehydration is dangerous. Yes, heavy panting rapidly depletes the body's moisture reserves, but we must evaluate the timeline of lethality.
What do you mean by that?
A dog can survive a state of severe dehydration for hours, sometimes even a day or two, before it becomes a truly fatal condition. However, if their core body temperature exceeds 106 or 107 degrees Fahrenheit, it will cause irreversible brain damage, protein denaturation, and multi-organ failure in a matter of minutes.
Minutes versus hours.
Exactly. In the triage of emergency medicine, temperature regulation trumps immediate hydration every single time. You must put out the immediate fire before you worry about refilling the water tank.
Put out the fire before you refill the water tank. That is the defining mental framework every single dog owner needs to adopt.
It really is.
So, looking at the article's next heading, let your dog rest and cool down before offering them water. It outlines the immediate protocol. The very first step is to move the dog to a shaded area or into a cool indoor environment.
Crucial first step.
Then, you wet their paws and ears with cool water or a damp towel. And then, only after they have rested and their core temperature has begun to normalize, do you offer small amounts of water.
The operative word there is patience.
Which is hard.
It is psychologically excruciating for an owner to watch their beloved dog pant and struggle and deliberately withhold a bowl of water. But you have to trust the physiology. You must wait for their respiratory rate to settle, for their frantic, wide-eyed distress to calm down, and for their heart rate to drop back toward a baseline rhythm.
And then it's safe.
Only then is the vascular system relaxed enough to accept hydration without triggering that fatal vasoconstriction reflex.
Got it. The article also mentions a general hydration rule for maintenance, 1 ounce of water per pound of body weight per day. And it points out that brachycephalic dogs need extra attention as they overheat much more easily.
Oh, significantly more easily.
For those who aren't familiar with the term, brachycephalic refers to dogs with pushed-in, short snouts. Think bulldogs, pugs, Frenchies, and boxers. I want to understand why these specific breeds are at such a catastrophically higher risk. If panting is their main cooling tool, did we essentially breed the radiator out of them?
That is precisely what we have done.
Wow.
To comprehend the vulnerability of brachycephalic breeds, we really have to look at the anatomy of the canine skull and the physics of their respiratory tract.
Right.
As we've established, dogs don't sweat to cool down, they pant.
Right.
Panting is an intricate evaporative cooling process. It relies heavily on the massive surface area hidden inside a normal dog's long snout. We're talking about the nasal turbinates, which are complex, scroll-like bones covered in vascular tissue along with a long tongue and an extensive open airway.
A classic dog profile.
Yes. But over centuries of selective breeding for aesthetic purposes, we have taken breeds like pugs and English bulldogs and completely compressed their cranial structure. We have squished their facial anatomy flat.
We dramatically reduced the physical surface area available for evaporation.
We eliminated the runway. But it is worse than just a lack of surface area. Their soft palates, the tissue at the back of the throat are often too long for their shortened snouts, which partially obstructs the airway.
So they can't even breathe clearly.
No. Their nostrils are frequently pinched tight, a congenital condition called stenotic nares. So not only do they have drastically less surface area to cool the air as it passes through, but they have to spend twice as much muscular effort just to pull the air into their lungs.
And muscular effort requires energy, and energy produces heat.
Exactly. The sheer physical exertion of trying to breathe heavily through a compromised airway creates an internal heat source. It is a vicious, compounding cycle.
It's like they're fighting their own body.
They are generating more heat just trying to breathe, while simultaneously possessing a drastically reduced anatomical capacity to vent that heat. This makes them incredibly susceptible to rapid onset heat stroke, even in temperatures that a normal dog would find completely mild.
Which perfectly bridges us into a deeper look at the actual mechanics of dog thermoregulation.
Okay, let's get into it.
Because the article explains that panting is the primary cooling mechanism. As a dog pants, moisture from their tongue and airways evaporates, dispersing bodily warmth. Let's really pull the lens back on this. What is actually happening at a chemical or physical level when a dog pants?
Let's talk about the physics of evaporation, because it is far more complex than just breathing fast. Evaporation is a phase change.
Like liquid to gas.
Yes. When liquid water fuses the saliva on a dog's tongue, and the moisture lining their lungs and nasal passages turns into water vapor, it requires a substantial amount of thermal energy. In physics, this is known as the latent heat of vaporization.
Okay, the latent heat of vaporization.
The energy required to break the molecular bonds of the liquid and turn it into a gas doesn't just come from nowhere. It is pulled directly from the surrounding environment. And in this case, the surrounding environment is the dog's vascular tissue.
Wait, so every time the water changes from a liquid to a gas, it physically steals heat from the dog's blood?
Yes, every single time the dog exhales that cloud of invisible water vapor, they are literally exhaling microscopic pockets of heat drawn straight from their bloodstream.
That is a phenomenal piece of biological engineering.
It's remarkably efficient.
It's identical to the mechanics of an evaporative cooler, or what a lot of people in dry climates call a swamp cooler.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
A swamp cooler pulls hot outside air through a series of thick, water-soaked pads. As the air passes through, the water in the pads evaporates. The evaporation process pulls the heat out of the air, and the machine blows significantly cooler air into the house. A dog's respiratory tract is just a complex biological swamp cooler.
It really is.
But the heading, "What is overheating in dogs?" defines heat stroke as the point where a dog's internal temperature exceeds their body's cooling capacity. Essentially, the biological swamp cooler breaks down and can no longer keep up with the ambient heat load.
And when that system fails, the interventions we attempt can either save them or kill them.
Which brings up a crucial detail from the source material. When discussing how to intervene, it repeatedly emphasizes the use of cool water on the fur to help them. But it specifically urgently warns against using cold water or ice, stating that it causes shock.
Yes, absolutely no ice.
I feel like we touched on this with the internal stomach reaction earlier, but applying ice to the outside of an overheating dog seems like it would be incredibly effective at lowering their temperature. Why is ice dangerous?
It circles right back to the central nervous system and the vasoconstriction we discussed earlier, but on a much more immediate, catastrophic, and systemic scale. The skin is embedded with countless thermoreceptors. If you plunge a severely overheated dog whose core is cooking at 106 degrees into an ice bath, or if you hose them down with freezing, ice-cold water, those thermoreceptors immediately scream a massive warning signal to the brain. We are freezing.
It's a false alarm.
A massive, overriding false alarm. The body instantly shifts its priority from trying to dump heat to violently trying to conserve it. The blood vessels at the surface of the skin clamp down so hard and so fast that it can send the dog into deep physiological shock.
So they just lock up.
The peripheral circulation entirely shuts down. You have now trapped that deadly hyperthermic blood in the core surrounding the brain, the heart, the liver, and the kidneys. You can easily induce a fatal cardiac event or guarantee massive, irreversible organ failure by trying to cool them down too aggressively with ice.
Wow, it forces the body into a frantic survival mode, reacting to the artificial threat of freezing water on the outside while completely ignoring the actual lethal threat of the boiling temperatures on the inside. That is profound.
It's a tragic mistake people make all the time.
And it emphasizes how delicate the balance of intervention really is.
Which is why the article's next heading, Preventive Measures for Overheating in Dogs, lays down the absolute, non-negotiable rule of summer dog ownership.
Yeah.
Never, ever leave dogs in parked cars, even on mild days. Ensuring airflow and shade is paramount.
I really want you listening to pause and think deeply about this hot car phenomenon because despite all the public awareness campaigns, it still happens every single summer.
Far too often.
And tragically, it often happens to owners who genuinely believe they are being safe. They crack the windows a few inches, they park under the shade of a tree, they look at the thermometer and see it's a mild 70-degree day, and they think it's perfectly fine to run into the store for 10 minutes.
It's a fatal miscalculation.
But we have to look at the physics of a vehicle. We have to consider the greenhouse effect. A car isn't just a metal box. It is a highly efficient solar amplifier.
It operates on the exact same thermodynamic principles as a commercial greenhouse. The shortwave solar radiation from the sun passes seamlessly through the glass windows of the car.
Right.
This high-energy radiation strikes the dashboard, the dark upholstery, the steering wheel, and heats them up rapidly. Those objects then radiate that thermal energy back out into the cabin. However, they radiate it as long-wave infrared radiation.
And long-wave radiation can't pass back through the glass.
Exactly. The glass is opaque to long-wave infrared radiation. The heat gets trapped inside the cabin and begins to compound. Even on a deceptively mild 70-degree day, the interior of a car can reach 100 degrees in 20 minutes and soar over 115 degrees in an hour.
So cracking the windows doesn't help.
Cracking the windows does almost nothing to stop this aggressive thermal accumulation because the heat isn't just in the air, it is radiating from the solid surfaces of the interior.
And let's bring it back to our swamp cooler analogy. For a dog to cool down by panting, the physics of evaporation require two things. The air they are breathing in must be relatively cool, and it cannot be saturated with humidity.
That is the fatal flaw of the hot car scenario. As the dog begins to panic and pant heavily, they are exhaling massive amounts of moisture into a tiny sealed environment.
Oh, making it humid.
The humidity inside the car skyrockets. Very quickly, the air becomes completely saturated. The water on their tongue and in their lungs can no longer evaporate because the surrounding air cannot hold any more moisture.
The swamp cooler breaks.
Furthermore, the air they are breathing in is now superheated. Their primary, secondary, and tertiary cooling mechanisms are completely neutralized. They are suffocating in a sauna of their own making.
It's a death trap, pure and simple.
It really is.
But let's step away from the car scenario. Let's imagine a situation where an owner is dealing with a dog that has overheated on a long hike, or perhaps playing too hard in the backyard.
A very common scenario.
And let's say this owner hasn't listened to our deep dive yet. They don't know the rule about withholding water. They see their violently panting dog, and they let them chug a massive, deep bowl of room temperature water. We know about the vasoconstriction issue with cold water, but the source material details a completely different physiological disaster that unfolds when a dog is allowed to gorge on water while overheated.
Yes, it does.
This leads us into the section of the article covering the risks of overheating dogs drinking water.
This is where we transition from discussing thermal dangers to exploring profound mechanical and metabolic dangers.
The article explains that drinking water actually raises the body's internal temperature because the very process of digestion generates heat. It puts a massive additional strain on an already overworked thermoregulatory system. Now, I'm going to push back hard on this on behalf of our listeners because it sounds totally counterintuitive.
I can see why.
Wait a minute. Water has 0 calories. It is not a heavy meal of dense kibble or fat. How on earth does digesting plain 0-calorie water generate internal heat?
If we look closely at cellular biology and thermodynamics, it actually makes perfect sense. While it is true that water itself doesn't contain caloric energy that the body burns for fuel, the mechanical and cellular process of moving that massive volume of water through the body requires a tremendous expenditure of energy.
Moving the water takes energy.
Yes. When a dog drinks a large volume of water, the smooth muscles of the stomach have to actively contract to push that heavy fluid into the intestines. Once it reaches the intestines, the cells lining the gut have to actively transport the water molecules across the cell membranes and into the bloodstream.
They don't just passively absorb it like a sponge?
No, much of it requires active transport. The cells use specialized pumps, like sodium-potassium pumps, to move ions and water across the barrier. Furthermore, as the massive volume of water enters the bloodstream, the blood volume expands.
Making the heart work harder.
The heart suddenly has to pump much harder to accommodate and circulate this increased volume. Every single one of those actions, the muscular contractions of the stomach, the cellular pumps in the intestines, the increased cardiac output burns ATP, which is the primary energy currency of the cell. And the unavoidable byproduct of burning ATP is heat.
Okay, I see it now. It's like having a house where the air conditioning is totally broken, it's 100 degrees inside, and you decide to turn on the oven to bake a pie.
That's a great way to put it.
You are actively adding a significant internal heat source to a closed system that is already failing to vent its existing heat.
Precisely. You are forcing the body to perform heavy metabolic work at the exact moment it needs to be completely at rest, dedicating all its available resources to cooling. That internal heat generation accelerates the hyperthermia cascade.
But there's more, right?
But as the article vividly points out under the heading gastric dilatation volvulus in dogs, the metabolic thermal strain is only half the danger.
Yes, and this is where the biological reality gets truly nightmarish. The article states that rapid drinking causes dogs to gulp air, which can lead to bloating or gastric dilatation volvulus, commonly known as GDV, or a twisted stomach.
It's a terrifying condition.
It explicitly states that this is a life-threatening condition that cuts off blood flow to the stomach, kills tissue, harms organs, and requires immediate emergency veterinary care.
I'm looking at this condition, and from what I understand about a dog gulping water and air, it sounds like their stomach is basically turning into a water balloon. But how does that actually kill them? Is the balloon popping?
It is not popping, but what happens is arguably worse. GDV is one of the most critical, time-sensitive emergency situations in veterinary medicine.
Walk us through it. Let's break down the anatomical mechanics of how this happens. When an overheated, panicked dog gets access to a large body of water, they don't politely sip it. They frantically gorge themselves. Because they are already panting heavily, essentially gasping for air when they plunge their face into the water bowl, they are swallowing massive amounts of ambient air along with the heavy water.
Gulping air and water together.
In medical terms, this is called aerophagia.
So the stomach is rapidly filling up with a volatile mixture of heavy, sloshing liquid and expansive gas.
Right. Now, you have to picture the canine stomach. It is not rigidly fixed in place. It is essentially a muscular bag suspended by relatively loose ligaments within the abdominal cavity.
It can move around.
As it fills with this massive volume of air and water, it begins to dilate. It swells up tremendously, tight like a drum. This is the gastric dilatation part of GDV. Just the bloating alone is incredibly painful and highly dangerous.
Why is the bloating itself so dangerous?
That massive swollen stomach presses forward against the diaphragm, restricting the lungs and making it almost impossible for the dog to pull in a full breath. Even more critically, it presses down hard on the caudal vena cava.
The caudal vena cava, what does that do?
It's the massive primary vein responsible for returning deoxygenated blood from the lower half of the body back to the heart. When the bloated stomach compresses that vein, it severely drops the dog's blood pressure and cardiac output.
Which is already severely compromised because they are in the middle of a heat stroke.
Exactly. It radically compounds the physiological shock. But the true lethal horror happens if the stomach decides to twist.
The volvulus.
Yes, because the stomach is now this heavy, distended, sloshing pendulum suspended by loose ligaments. Any sudden movement, the dog pacing, trying to lay down, or even just the uneven weight distribution of the water and gas can cause the entire stomach to flip over on its own axis. That is the volvulus.
It twists like a candy wrapper.
Yes. And when it twists, it hermetically seals off both the entrance from the esophagus and the exit to the intestines. Nothing can get in and nothing can get out.
Oh, no.
The gas inside continues to expand, but the dog cannot burp or vomit to relieve the pressure. Furthermore, the twisting action strangles the major blood vessels supplying the stomach walls. It also usually drags the spleen along with it, twisting and strangulating the splenic blood supply as well.
It literally chokes off its own blood supply. The tissue inside the dog's body begins to die almost immediately.
It is massive, rapid tissue necrosis inside the abdominal cavity.
The article has a separate heading specifically titled Bleeding in Dogs, which reiterates that preventing this mechanical disaster is absolutely key. You simply cannot let an overheated dog take big, frantic gulps. You have to enforce small sips regularly instead of big drinks.
Prevention is the only real strategy here.
Right, because GDV can kill a dog in a matter of hours, sometimes less, if they don't get immediate emergency surgery to physically untwist the stomach and tack it to the abdominal wall.
It's a massive invasive surgery.
So, if letting them chug water is out and plunging them in ice water is out, what are the exact step-by-step physical measures an owner should take to save their dog in that critical moment?
This brings us perfectly to the practical application of everything we've discussed. The importance of rest and specific cooling measures.
Let's go through the guidance under the heading Helping Dogs Stay Cool. The absolute first priority is getting them to a shaded, chilled area to lower internal warmth slowly.
Slowly being the key word.
And then it says to target specific body parts with cool, and it clarifies that means lukewarm or slightly cooler than body temp water. It specifically lists the paws, ears, armpits, and groin. You should use a damp towel or a spray bottle. I want to know the why behind this. Why these specific areas? Why not just dump a bucket of ambient water right over their back and chest?
The strategy is entirely based on canine vascular geography.
Vascular geography, okay.
The back, the chest, and the flanks of a dog are covered in thick fur and insulating layers of subcutaneous fat. Pouring water over their back is largely ineffective for rapid internal cooling because the water just sits on top of those insulating layers.
It doesn't reach the core.
It might wet the fur, but it doesn't effectively draw heat out of the core. But the armpits, the groin, the ear flaps, and the paw pads are what we call thermal windows.
Thermal windows, that paints a great picture.
In these highly specific anatomical areas, there is very little fur, the skin is incredibly thin, and most importantly, major massive blood vessels run right at the surface of the skin.
Right on the surface.
In the groin area, you have the femoral artery. In the armpits, you have the axillary artery. By applying cool, ambient temperature water to these specific pulse points, you are bypassing the insulation and directly cooling the large volumes of blood as it courses rapidly through those major vessels.
You are chilling the fluid inside the pipes.
Precisely. That freshly cooled blood then circulates back to the heart and is pumped deep into the core organs, acting like an internal heatsink for the entire bloodstream. You are lowering the core temperature from the inside out, safely and gradually, without triggering the sudden vasoconstriction that ice would cause.
It is incredibly logical when you break down the vascular map like that. It's exactly like when you are feeling overheated. Maybe you've been working out in the garden or running in the sun, and you go to the sink and run your own wrists under a cold tap.
That's the exact same principle.
The skin on the inside of the human wrist is thin, the veins are right on the surface, and cooling your wrist can make your whole body feel immensely cooler almost instantly. We're doing the exact same thing for our dogs, just utilizing their specific pulse points.
Exactly right.
But let me pose a very realistic, scary scenario for you, the listener. What if you're out on a trail, you are a mile from your parked car, your dog suddenly overheats and collapses. You don't have air conditioning, you don't have a fan. All you have is half a bottle of drinking water that has been sitting in your backpack so it is warm ambient temperature. What do you do in that exact moment?
The very first thing you do is stop all forward momentum. You do not try to force the dog to walk back to the car.
Stop immediately.
Yes. You find the deepest, coolest shade available immediately under a dense tree canopy, beside a large rock outcropping, or even in the shadow of a small hill. If there is a breeze, position the dog so the breeze hits them directly.
Right, get them out of the sun and into the airflow.
Then you take that ambient temperature water from your backpack, and despite their panting, you do not let them drink it yet. You pour a small amount into the palm of your hands, and you gently, methodically rub it deeply into their armpits, into the thin skin of their groin, onto the flaps of their ears, and onto their paw pads.
Using those thermal windows.
You use the environment and the tiny amount of resources you have to facilitate targeted evaporative cooling at those critical vascular junctions. And then you wait.
Just wait.
You monitor their breathing. You wait for the frantic, shallow panting to subside into a deeper, more normal rhythm.
Under the heading Prevent Doggy Heat Illnesses, the article notes that if you are indoors, you should use fans or air conditioning to circulate fresh, cool air and to strictly avoid unventilated spots or direct sun. The airflow aspect seems critical because, going back to our swamp cooler analogy, if the air immediately surrounding the dog is stagnant and highly humid from their own heavy panting, evaporation ceases.
Right, the air can't hold more moisture.
So the fan is constantly replacing that stagnant humid air with dry air, allowing the phase change of evaporation to continue pulling heat away from their body.
Exactly. You are actively managing the microclimate immediately surrounding the dog. You are optimizing their biological cooling mechanisms rather than shocking their system with cold water or overloading their internal metabolism by letting them drink massive volumes.
So we have successfully navigated the immediate crisis. The dog was dangerously hot, but we withheld the massive bowl of water. We found shade, we cooled the thermal windows, the armpits, groin, ears, and paws with ambient water, and now the dog is finally stabilized. Their breathing has slowed, the frantic look is out of their eyes.
The crisis is averted.
The immediate crisis is averted, but how do we safely reintroduce the water their body desperately needs to recover? This takes us to the careful protocol outlined in the section. Offering dogs water after rest and cooling.
This recovery phase requires just as much discipline and deliberate action from the owner as the active cooling phase.
The heading Monitor Dogs' Water Intake provides some very specific actionable guidelines. It says to use shallow bowls to prevent fast drinking. Offer small amounts. Slightly chilled water is acceptable now, but ice cold is still an absolute no-go.
Still no ice.
Right. And we need to actively watch for clinical signs of dehydration, which the article lists as dry gums, sunken eyes, lethargy, and a loss of skin elasticity. It also mentions that electrolyte solutions and pet store water flavorings can help encourage drinking if the dog is reluctant, and reminds us to wash bowls regularly to stop bacteria.
All great advice.
Let's break down the physical assessments first. How do we actually test for a loss of skin elasticity in a dog?
This is a fantastic, highly practical skill for every single dog owner to learn and practice. In veterinary medicine, we call it the tent test, or the skin turgor test.
The tent test.
You gently grasp a loose fold of skin, usually at the scruff of the dog's neck or over their shoulders. You pull it up slightly away from the body so it forms a physical tent shape, and then you let it go.
Okay, what am I looking for?
In a healthy, well-hydrated dog, The skin contains plenty of interstitial fluid, which is the moisture that lives in the spaces between the cells and the tissues, which makes the skin highly elastic and resilient. The skin should snap back flat into place almost instantly.
We're talking a fraction of a second.
Right. Immediately. But in a dog suffering from significant dehydration, the tissues have lost that interstitial fluid and, consequently, that elasticity. When you pull the skin up and let it go, it will stay tented up for several seconds or it will sink back down very, very slowly.
Oh, wow.
It feels doughy and stiff rather than springy. That delayed return is a clinical sign that the dog is significantly lacking systemic fluid.
And what about the gums? The article mentions dry gums as a primary indicator. I feel like my dog's mouth is always kind of wet and slobbery, especially when they've been panting. What does a dry gum actually feel like to the touch?
The visual of drool can be really misleading. To test this, you need to lift the dog's lip and physically touch the gum line above their canine teeth.
Just run a finger over it.
If you run your finger along a healthy, hydrated dog's gums, they should feel slick, smooth, and heavily coated in mucus, very much like the inside of your own cheek. If a dog is dehydrated, those mucous membranes dry out significantly as the body pulls moisture away from the periphery to support the core organs.
So they won't be slick.
No, the gums will feel tacky, sticky, or in severe cases, completely dry to the touch. Your finger will actually drag and catch across the tissue instead of sliding smoothly.
That is a really solid physical benchmark to use. Now, regarding the rehydration process, the article suggests using a shallow bowl to prevent fast drinking. I compare this technique to using a complex, slow feeder puzzle bowl for a dog that inhales their kibble too fast.
That's a very similar concept.
You are structurally, physically enforcing a slower pace. If you only put half an inch of water into a wide, flat, shallow bowl, the dog physically cannot plunge their snout in and take a massive air-filled gulp. They are forced to lap it up slowly with their tongue, which gives their stomach time to slowly distend and adjust.
Exactly.
It entirely prevents them from swallowing those large pockets of air that lead to the catastrophic GDV we talked about earlier.
But this raises a very common, frustrating reality of recovery, though, which the article brilliantly addresses. What happens when your dog, who just survived a terrifying overheating scare and desperately needs fluid, is now stubborn, exhausted, and simply refuses to drink the plain water you are so carefully offering?
Oh, which happens all the time. They feel sick, their stomach is likely a bit upset from the residual heat and the stress, and plain water is just unappealing.
It's very common.
The source mentions utilizing pet store water flavorings or specific electrolyte solutions. I think this is an absolute game changer for recovery. When my dog was recovering from a mild stomach bug last year, she wouldn't touch her water. The vet told me to put a small splash of low-sodium chicken broth in her bowl.
Ah, yes.
Suddenly, she thought she was being offered a bowl of savory soup, and she drank the whole thing slowly.
It is an excellent practical strategy, but you must ensure it is dog-safe, absolutely no onions or garlic in the broth, as those are highly toxic to dogs.
Right, plain dog-safe broth.
And utilizing canine-specific electrolyte solutions is fantastic because, just like human athletes running a marathon, dogs lose essential minerals when they undergo severe physical stress and heavy panting.
Like potassium and sodium.
Replenishing those specific ions helps their cellular sodium-potassium pumps recover much faster than offering plain water alone. The article also stresses setting a consistent routine to regulate a dog's hydration incrementally throughout the entire day, ensuring they maintain a healthy baseline rather than relying on them to binge drink massive amounts only when they get intensely thirsty.
The final heading in the article is a comprehensive recap. Preventing overheating and dehydration in dogs. It hits all the critical high notes again. Walk only in the cool, early morning or late evening hours. Provide constant access to fresh water and deep shade, and absolutely never, under any circumstances, leave them in parked cars.
All the golden rules.
But it also suggests a tool we haven't touched on yet. Cooling mats or cooling vests, noting they're especially useful for thick-furred or short-snouted brachycephalic broods. And it reminds owners to constantly monitor active play closely for signs of heavy panting or weakness. I want to look at those cooling vests. Do they actually work?
Those cooling vests can be incredibly effective, but only if the owner understands the physics of how they function.
How so?
They work on that exact same principle of evaporative cooling we discussed with the swamp cooler. You soak the fabric vest in water, wring out the excess, and strap it onto the dog. As the moisture in the vest slowly evaporates into the hot ambient air, It actively pulls thermal energy away from the dog's body.
Oh, like fake sweat.
It essentially acts as a highly efficient artificial sweat layer for an animal that lacks the biological capacity to sweat. However, you have to be extremely careful using them in highly humid environments.
Because if the air is saturated, the water in the vest can evaporate.
Precisely. If the humidity is close to 100%, evaporation stops. In that scenario, the vest stops cooling and instead simply traps a layer of warm, stagnant moisture tightly against the dog's core, effectively insulating them and making the hyperthermia worse.
It becomes a wet, stifling wetsuit.
Yes, exactly.
So, absolute environmental awareness is the key to using those tools safely. Man, we have covered a truly massive amount of physiological, mechanical, and practical information today. It is time to bring all this science and actionable advice together so our listeners have a crystal clear picture of how to protect their companions.
It really requires a complete paradigm shift in how we approach canine care during the relentless heat of summer. We have to override our own instincts.
We started by recognizing the severe evolutionary biological limitations our dogs face, the stark reality that they simply cannot sweat like humans do, relying perilously only on their paw pads and noses. We tackled the highly counterintuitive hydration paradox, learning that offering a massive bowl of water to a violently panting, overheated dog is actually dangerous because it triggers sudden vasoconstriction, effectively clamping the radiator shut and trapping deadly heat in their core organs.
A deadly mistake.
We dove into the terrifying mechanical reality of GDV, or twisted stomach, which occurs when a panicked dog gulps heavy water and expansive air, leading to tissue strangulation. And finally, we mapped out the precise life-saving steps you should take in a crisis. Finding immediate shade, applying ambient temperature water to the critical thermal windows, the armpits, groin, ears, and paws to slowly draw the heat out of their bloodstream, and then rehydrating them slowly, using shallow bowls and electrolyte solutions to prevent shock.
It is entirely about working intelligently with their unique biology, rather than fighting against it with our human assumptions.
Beautifully said.
And as we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final overarching thought to ponder.
Okay, what is it?
Throughout this extensive discussion, we have meticulously detailed the biological limitations of dogs. But we must also recognize how much we, as a species, have artificially altered these animals through centuries of selective domestication.
We did breed them this way.
We have intentionally bred dogs with incredibly thick, dense, double coats because we appreciate their aesthetic, and then we have relocated them to sweltering, unnatural climates. We have intentionally flattened and shortened the snouts of brachycephalic breeds like pugs and bulldogs, severely compromising their only natural method of evaporative cooling.
We took away their swamp cooler.
Because we have fundamentally altered their anatomical ability to survive in natural extremes, this places a profound, undeniable moral responsibility squarely on our shoulders. We are not just their owners, we are their surrogate thermoregulators.
Surrogate thermoregulators. I love that term.
They rely entirely on our modern intellect, our situational awareness, and our willingness to put their specific biological needs above our own human instincts in order to survive the harsh environments we have placed them in.
That is an incredibly powerful point to end on. We built them to live in our world, so we have an absolute obligation to protect them from it. Thank you for listening, dear Brigadiers, and if you have any questions, visit the source article on Dogazilla magazine at dogazilla.com. That was all for this episode, and until the next time, bye to all listeners of the Bark Brigade podcast.